I still remember the exact sound of her sobbing, soft at first, like she was trying to swallow it back, right? There at my birthday table, Dot, it was the kind of cry that doesn't ask for attention, but somehow steals the air from the room anyway. Everyone else was laughing. Plates clinked. My sister was pouring iced tea. The candles on my cake were still burning, their little flames bending every time someone walked past. And there she was, my daughter-in-law, sitting stiff in her chair, hands folded in her lap, tears slipping down her cheeks as if her body had decided to tell the truth before her mouth ever could. I didn't know it then, but that cry was the sound of a secret reaching its breaking point. I had turned 62 that day. Not a milestone people throw big parties for, but I've always believed birthdays are less about age and more about gratitude. I woke up early that morning, like I always do. The house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. I made myself a cup of coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching the sunlight creep across the floor. There was a calmness in me that morning. The kind that comes when you think your life is settled. When you believe you know the people you raised. My son, Daniel, had insisted we host the celebration at my house. You always do everything for everyone else, he'd said the week before. Let us do this for you, Mom. Meeting him and his wife, Lila, they'd been married just over 2 years. A small courthouse wedding, nothing flashy. Lila was quiet, polite, the kind of woman who said, "Thank you," even when you handed her something she didn't ask for. She helped me wash dishes, folded napkins neatly, always remembered birthdays. I liked her. I truly did, but if I'm being honest, the way I can be now, she always felt like someone holding her breath. That morning, I cleaned the house slowly, deliberately. I vacuumed the living room, wiped down the kitchen counters, even polished the dining table, though no one but family would be sitting there. I made my famous lemon pound cake, the one Daniel used to beg for as a child, and the smell filled the house. Warm and familiar. By noon, people started arriving. My sister Ruth with her loud laugh and jangling bracelets. A couple of cousins. Daniel and Lila came last. I noticed it the moment she walked in. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She hugged me tightly, tighter than usual, and whispered, "Happy birthday," in a voice that trembled just enough for me to feel it against my ear. When she pulled back, her eyes were glossy, like she'd already been crying. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked quietly. She nodded too quickly. "Just allergies," she said, waving it off. "Spring gets me every year." But it wasn't spring, and it wasn't allergies. Daniel was distracted. That's the word I'd use now. Back then, I told myself he was just busy, work stress, bills, life. He checked his phone too often, laughed a little too loud, talked over people instead of listening. He kissed my cheek and handed me a wrapped box without really looking at me. "Open it later," he said. "It's fragile." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten, though I didn't know why. Lunch went on as planned. Fried chicken, green beans, cornbread. People talked about church, about gas prices, about someone's knee surgery. Normal things. Safe things. Lila barely touched her food. She pushed peas around her plate, lifted her fork, and set it down again. Every now and then, she'd glance at Daniel. Not the way a wife looks at her husband, but the way someone checks the time when they're late for something they don't want to attend. I watched her more than I meant to. I've lived long enough to know when a woman is carrying something heavy inside her. It shows up in the smallest ways, the way she sits too straight, the way her jaw tightens when someone says an innocent word. Lila's shoulders were tense, like she was bracing herself for impact. When it came time for cake, everyone gathered around the table. Someone dimmed the lights. The candles flickered, casting soft shadows on familiar faces. Ruth started singing off-key as always, and everyone joined in. I closed my eyes for a moment, made a quiet wish I didn't speak out loud, let my family stay whole. When I opened my eyes, that's when I saw Lila. Her lips were pressed together, trembling. Tears slid down her face, one after the other, landing silently on the tablecloth. She stared at the cake like it was something dangerous. Lila, I said gently. Honey. The singing faltered, then stopped altogether. All eyes turned to her. I'm so sorry, she whispered, standing up so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. Her hands shook as she covered her mouth, and then the sob came, raw and uncontrollable, ripping through the room. I didn't want it to happen like this. Daniel stood up fast. Lila, what are you doing? His voice was sharp, panicked. Sit down. She looked at him, then Dot really looked at him, and in her eyes, I saw fear tangled with guilt, and something else too, resolve. I can't, she said, her voice breaking. I can't keep pretending. Not today. The room felt suddenly too small. The candles burned lower, wax dripping onto the cake like time was running out. Daniel's face went pale. Stop, he hissed under his breath. You promised. That word promised landed in my chest like a stone. What is going on? I asked, my voice calm though my heart had begun to pound. Lila turned to me, tears streaming freely now. I never wanted to hurt you, she said. You've always been kind to me, but I can't sit at your table and smile anymore knowing what I know. I looked at my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And in that moment, before a single truth was spoken out loud, I understood something terrible. Whatever Daniel was hiding, his wife had been carrying it alone, and it was about to come out. Asterisk, the room stayed frozen in that strange, uncomfortable silence, the kind where no one knows whether to sit down or stand up, whether to speak or pretend nothing is happening. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock above the stove, each second stretching longer than the last. Daniel, I said again, softer this time. What is she talking about? He swallowed hard. I watched his throat move, his jaw tighten. He looked like a boy who'd been caught stealing from the cookie jar, except this wasn't a cookie jar. It was my life, my family, my sense of safety. It's not what you think, he said quickly. Reaching for Lila's arm, she pulled away. That's exactly the problem, she said, her voice steadier now, though her eyes were still wet. You keep deciding what people are allowed to think instead of telling the truth. Ruth cleared her throat. Maybe we should give them some privacy, she offered, glancing around at the others, but I shook my head. No, I said. If something's being said today, it's being said where it started, at this table. Daniel's eyes flicked to me then, wide with a kind of fear I'd never seen in him before. Not when he broke his arm at 10. Not when his father passed. This was different. Lila slowly sat back down, pressing a napkin to her eyes. I didn't plan this, she said. I swear I didn't, but every time I looked at you today, I kept thinking. She doesn't know. She has no idea who her son really is. The words stung. I straightened in my chair. Then tell me, I said. What don't I know? Daniel slammed his hand against the table. Not hard enough to hurt anyone, but enough to make the plates rattle. That's enough, he snapped. You're making a scene. A scene. Lila repeated, a bitter laugh slipping out. You've been living a whole other life, Daniel. Don't talk to me about scenes. Asterisk, the room erupted in murmurs. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered my name. My heart started to race. But my voice stayed calm. Years of motherhood had taught me that sometimes calm is the sharpest blade. Daniel, I said slowly, sit down. He hesitated. Then reluctantly, he did. I turned back to Lila. Go on. She took a deep breath, as if steadying herself before stepping off a ledge. When Daniel and I met, she began. He told me he'd just gotten out of a serious relationship, said it ended badly, said he wanted a fresh start. Daniel stared straight ahead, his face rigid. Asterisk. We dated for a year before we got married, she continued. And during that time, there were gaps. Days he'd say he was traveling for work. Phone calls he'd step outside to take. I asked questions, but he always had answers. Her fingers twisted together in her lap. I wanted to believe him. I felt a slow, sinking heaviness settle in my chest. And then? I asked, and then, she said, her voice cracking again, I found paperwork. Asterisk. Daniel shot to his feet. You promised you wouldn't. I promised I wouldn't tell if you told her yourself. She cut in. You never did? I looked at him. Paperwork for what? He opened his mouth, closed it, ran a hand through his hair. Daniel, I said quietly. Answer me. He exhaled sharply, like the truth was being dragged out of him against his will. I was married before, he said. The words hung in the air, thin and fragile. Ruth frowned. We know that. He dated someone seriously before Lila? No, Lila said. Not dated. She turned to me, her eyes pleading. He was married. Still married. When we met, the world seemed to tilt. What? I whispered. Daniel shook his head. It's not like that. Then explain it, I said, my hands gripping the edge of the table. He sank back into his chair, defeated. I got married overseas, he said. Years ago. It was complicated, short-lived. We separated. But you never divorced her, Lila said. Silence again. You never divorced her? I repeated. Daniel didn't answer. My ears rang. I felt heat rush to my face, then drain away, leaving me cold. How long? I asked. How long were you married to this woman? He hesitated. 8 years. 8. I pressed my palm to my chest, trying to slow my breathing. So when you married Lila, I thought the first marriage didn't count, he said quickly. It was done abroad. Different laws. I was young. I didn't think it would ever come back. Lila let out a hollow sound that might have been a laugh. That's not how marriage works. My mind raced. I thought of every holiday, every family dinner. Every time I'd praise my son for being a good husband. You married my son, I said to Lila slowly, without knowing he was already someone else's husband. She nodded. I found out 6 months ago. 6 months, and you stayed? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I stayed because he begged me to, she said. He said he'd fix it, that he just needed time. Daniel finally looked at me then. Mom, I swear I was going to handle it. When? I asked. After children? After more lies? His shoulders slumped. I didn't want to lose my family. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You didn't protect your family, I said, my voice trembling now despite my efforts. You gambled with it. Lila wiped her face. The other woman contacted me, she said softly. She found our marriage record online. She didn't know about me either. I closed my eyes. 2 women. Both deceived. Both collateral damage. And today, Lila continued, she told me she's coming here. To confront him. To confront all of us, the room erupted. Here? Ruth exclaimed. Today? Lila nodded. She knows the address. I tried to stop her. My heart sank. Daniel buried his face in his hands. I didn't think she'd actually come. I looked around the table at my family. My home, my birthday cake melting quietly in the center, and realized this was only the beginning. The secret had surfaced. Now came the consequences. Asterisk. The room felt different after that, like the walls themselves were listening. Holding their breath along with the rest of us. No one touched the cake. The candles burned down to stubs and went out on their own, thin trails of smoke curling upward and disappearing into nothing. It felt symbolic in a way I didn't have the strength to put into words. "She's coming here?" I asked again, needing to hear it twice to make it real. Lila nodded, staring down at her hands. "She said she just wants the truth. She said she deserves to look him in the eye." Daniel finally lifted his head. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from the strain of holding them back. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he said. "I swear." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something crack inside me. "I believe you didn't mean to," I said slowly. "But intentions don't erase damage." Ruth stood up and began clearing plates, more out of nervous habit than necessity. The other relatives quietly gathered their things, murmuring awkward goodbyes. No one wanted to be present for what was clearly about to unfold. Within minutes, it was just the four of us left, me, Daniel, Lila, and the quiet hum of a house that suddenly felt too small to hold so much truth. Lila glanced toward the front window every few seconds. "When did she say she'd be here?" I asked. "Soon," she said. "She's already in town?" I walked to the sink and rinsed my hands, though they weren't dirty. The water ran too hot. I didn't turn it down. "This isn't happening in the driveway," I said finally. "If she's coming, she comes inside. She deserves respect, more than she's already been denied." Daniel opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. "I'll be here," I added. "And I expect honesty." There was a knock at the door less than 10 minutes later. 3 sharp raps, firm, certain. My heart thudded against my ribs as I walked down the hallway. With each step, memories surfaced. Daniel as a child running through this same house, laughing, safe. I wondered when exactly I'd lost sight of the man he was becoming. I opened the door. She was younger than I expected. Early 40s, maybe. Tall, with tired eyes and a posture that spoke of someone who had learned to stand alone. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse strap. "Are you his mother?" she asked. "I am," I said. "Please." "Come in." She hesitated, then stepped inside. Her gaze sweeping over the familiar walls, the family photos, the birthday decorations still hanging crookedly in the dining room. "I'm Mara," she said quietly. "Daniel's wife." Lila appeared behind me then. The 2 women locked eyes. Something passed between them, shock, recognition, a shared understanding that neither of them had asked for this. "I'm Lila," she said softly. I'm also his wife." Mara's lips pressed together, but she didn't look surprised. "I know," she said. "I've known for a while." Daniel stood frozen near the dining table. "Mara," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't think I'd have to," she replied. "But here we are." We sat in a living room, 3 women on the couch, Daniel perched stiffly in an armchair like a child awaiting punishment. The afternoon light slanted through the curtains, dust motes floating lazily in the air. Indifferent to the gravity of the moment, I married Daniel 20 years ago, Mara began. We met while he was working abroad. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Or at least I thought it was. Daniel stared at the floor. "He left suddenly," she continued. "Said he needed space. Promised we'd talk. Then he stopped answering my calls." I felt a familiar ache in my chest. The ache of realizing how much of someone's story you never truly know. "I spent years thinking I wasn't enough," Mara said. "Then I found out he built a whole new life here." Lila wiped her eyes. "I'm so sorry." Mara nodded. "I know this isn't your fault." That grace, undeserved by Daniel, nearly broke me. "I didn't come to fight," Mara said, looking around the room. "I came because I deserve closure. And because I need to know." "Was any of it real?" Daniel finally spoke. "It was real," he said hoarsely. "Both of you were real. I just didn't know how to let go." You didn't let go, I said sharply. You lied. He flinched up. Mara stood up. I've already filed for divorce, she said. In both countries. It's going to be messy. She looked at Lila. I won't fight you for him. I don't want him anymore. Lila's shoulders sagged like the fight had drained out of her all at once. Mara turned to me then. I'm sorry your birthday turned into this. I swallowed hard. Truth has its own timing, I said. Even when it's cruel. She nodded, then walked toward the door. Before leaving, she paused. Erased him, she said gently. I know this hurts you too. After she left, the house felt emptier than it ever had. Lila began to cry again, quieter this time. Daniel stared at nothing. I stood up slowly. This ends now, I said. The lies. The half-truths. All of it. Daniel looked up at me, eyes wet. What do I do? I held his gaze. You take responsibility, and you accept whatever comes next. Outside, the sun dipped lower in the sky, shadows stretching long across the floor. The truth had finally been spoken aloud. Now we all had to live with it. That night, after everyone had left and the house had settled into an uneasy quiet, I sat alone at the dining table staring at the untouched cake. The frosting had begun to sag. Candles melted down into soft wax puddles. It looked tired. Defeated. I felt the same. Daniel and Lila stayed the night, though neither of them slept much. I could hear footsteps in the hallway long after midnight, the low murmur of voices behind closed doors. Every sound felt heavier than it should have. In the early morning, I found Lila in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a mug of cold tea clasped in both hands. You didn't sleep, I said. She shook her head. I don't think I will for a while. I poured myself coffee and sat across from her. The clock ticked loudly between us. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. For your birthday. For everything. You didn't do this, I replied. You just refused to keep carrying it alone. Her eyes filled again. I feel stupid. I trusted him. That doesn't make you stupid, I said gently. It makes you human. She stared into her mug. I don't know if I can stay married to him. I didn't answer right away. I won't tell you what to do, I said finally. But whatever you decide, it needs to be for you. Not out of fear. Not out of obligation. She nodded slowly, like she was filing the words away for later. Daniel came into the kitchen then, his face drawn, eyes shadowed. He looked older than he had the day before. I'm calling a lawyer today, he said quietly. I'll cooperate with everything. That's a start, I said. He hesitated. Are you ashamed of me? The question landed hard. I studied my son, the man I had taught to ride a bike, to say please and thank you, to tell the truth even when it hurt. I'm disappointed, I said honestly. And I'm grieving the person I thought you were. But you're still my son. Tears slipped down his face. I never wanted to be this man. Then don't stay him, I said. The weeks that followed were slow and heavy. Word spread through the family, as it always does. Some people called with sympathy, others with judgment thinly disguised as concern. A few stayed silent altogether. Mara's lawyer contacted Daniel. Papers were filed. Dates were set. Lila moved out a month later. She didn't do it dramatically. No screaming, no slammed doors. She packed her things quietly, folded clothes with shaking hands, wiped down the bathroom sink like she was checking out of a hotel. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. Thank you for not blaming me, she whispered. You were brave, I said. That matters. Daniel watched from the hallway as she drove away. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 months later, I received a letter in the mail. The envelope was thick. Official. Inside were copies of documents I'd never seen before, property records, joint accounts, Investments. All in Daniel's name and my name. I called him immediately. What is this? I demanded. He was silent for a moment. Then he sighed. I used your credit years ago, he admitted. For business. I meant to pay it back. My hands shook. You never told me. I didn't think it mattered, he said weakly. You weren't using it? I felt something inside me harden. Since now, I said again. The same words I'd spoken months earlier, but this time, they were firmer. I contacted my own lawyer. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it out of necessity. We met in quiet offices with low lighting and neutral furniture. Truth after truth came out, each one chipping away at the illusion I'd held for so long. Daniel had lived recklessly. Assuming forgiveness would always follow, I loved him, but love didn't mean enabling. The legal consequences were real. Financial penalties, court dates, accountability. Some family members said I was being too harsh. He's your son, they reminded me. I know, I said. That's why I won't lie for him. Daniel didn't speak to me for weeks after that. It hurt more than I can describe. But in the quiet, something unexpected happened. I began to sleep better. I walked in the mornings. I cooked meals just for myself. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected. Slowly, the fog lifted. One afternoon, Lila called. I started therapy, she said. I'm finding my voice again. I smiled. I'm proud of you. Daniel called months later. I'm sorry, he said. For all of it. I listened. I didn't rush to forgive. I didn't need to punish him either. Some lessons need time to settle. That birthday, the tears, the truth. The broken illusions marked the end of something. And the beginning of something quieter, something honest. Asterisk. Time has a way of softening the sharpest edges, not by erasing what happened, but by teaching you how to live around it. By the time autumn came, the house felt different. Not empty exactly, just honest. The silence no longer buzzed with things unsaid. It rested, like it finally had permission to. Daniel, and I began meeting once a week for coffee. Neutral ground, public places. No assumptions, no pretending. The first few times were awkward. He'd talk too much, then go quiet. I'd sip my coffee and listen, letting him fill the space he'd spent years avoiding. I didn't know how to stop once it started. He admitted one afternoon, staring into his cup. Every lie needed another one to hold it up. That's how lies work, I said. They're heavy, and they don't age well. He nodded. I lost everything. Mom, I didn't correct him, because while he had lost much, his marriage, his reputation, the version of himself he believed in, he hadn't lost everything. He still had the chance to choose differently. I'm not here to rescue you, I said, but I'm here to witness you do better. That seemed to land. Lila sent me a card around Christmas. Inside was a photo of her new apartment, small, sunlit, plants on the windowsill. I'm learning what peace feels like, she wrote. Thank you for standing beside me when I needed it most. I held that card for a long time. Mara never contacted me again, but I thought of her often. I hoped she'd found her footing again. I hoped she'd learned that the lies told to her were not a measure of her worth. As for me, I turned 63 quietly. No party, no cake, just a candle on the kitchen counter, and a moment of gratitude for surviving a year that had rearranged my understanding of love. Daniel came by that evening. He brought a small plant, a peace lily. I didn't want to bring something temporary, he said. I placed it by the window. We sat together without speaking for a while, watching dusk settle outside. I know things will never be the same, he said eventually. They shouldn't be, I replied. But they can still be real. He nodded, eyes wet. Later, after he left, I sat alone and thought back to that birthday, to the tears at my table, to the truth breaking through celebration like a storm, realized something, then that moment hadn't ruined my birthday, Dot. It had reclaimed it, because the greatest gift I received that day wasn't wrapped. It didn't come with candles or applause, Dot. It was honesty, painful, necessary, life-changing. Honesty, Dot, if Lila hadn't cried, if she'd swallowed the truth one more time, we would all still be living inside a lie that would have eventually swallowed us whole. Sometimes love doesn't look like protecting someone. Sometimes it looks like letting the truth speak, even when it shakes the table, Dot, and maybe that's the lesson I carry now. Family isn't about perfection, Dot. It's about courage, Dot. It's about choosing truth over comfort. And it's about understanding that healing doesn't come from pretending nothing broke, but from deciding what's worth rebuilding. If you were sitting at that table, if you were in my place, would you have wanted to know? Would you have listened? Tell me in the comments, Dot, and if stories like mine remind you that you're not alone, that truth, however painful, can still lead to peace, consider subscribing. There are many more stories like this one.